An 11-year-old is sitting across from an experienced chess player while they are merely a beginner. Their brain nervously warps and winds while gazing at the 16 pieces in front of them, mustering up all the nervousness they have. They finger the way across the board, only to find that 3 moves later, their king is trapped in checkmate. This 11-year-old kid, as you may have guessed, is me. When I first started playing chess, this was how the first few games went. I very quickly learned that chess is a game based off reaction. But unlike in chess and life, we don't have this chessboard in front of us. We are a piece within this game of life, and we often choose to fall into the black hole of checkmate, not by chance, but by choice. Think about the obesity crisis. The obesity crisis has been around for 40 years, yet we still respond with the same failing solution to this problem. This solution being dieting. Ironically enough, obesity rates have skyrocketed, now more than ever, and we still respond with dieting. If the U.S. Department of Human and Health Services report 66% of our population is overweight, then something can't be right. Dieting is not the answer to obesity. This will be shown through examining the socioeconomics of food, the dangers of food propaganda, and how the food we eat drastically affects our brain. Obesity is very easy to cast away by blaming a person's laziness, but this problem has very little to do with the consumer, but has much to do with the environment. Healthline.com reports that in 2016, it was estimated that 76% of African American majority neighborhoods had a high portion of food insecurity. And this statistic is still accurate today, meaning many people don't have the physical or economic access to healthy food because they simply don't have the time. Think about it. A lower income person's time is majorly spent at work, so they don't have the luxury to come home to home cook a healthy quality meal. Knowing this, restaurants implant themselves into these neighborhoods and lower their menu prices, so people have no choice but to buy their food. And NIH.gov states heart disease and diabetes are very prevalent within the African American community. So this doesn't come as much of a surprise, especially there being no gyms, no parks, no facilities within these neighborhoods for people to go to exercise. How can we expect people to become healthy in an environment where they have evolved to become fat? So what are we doing to prevent this? Brendan Brazier once said the number one reason for obesity in North America is simple: overconsumption. And we overconsume because we are hungry. We consume not because we want to eat a mass amount of food, but because we feel propelled to eat by an external force. Along with the socioeconomics of low-income neighborhoods being a factor of obesity, obesity is overall rising because of food marketing, presentation, and propaganda. Marlene Schwartz, director of the Rudd Center for Food Policy and Obesity, states, historically, food didn't last forever. You had to eat food when you had it, so the idea of eating more when you have so much available makes sense. When we buy bulk foods, we're more likely to finish it within a few days, because we're naturally drawn to eat more food the more that we see, because we crave that satisfaction. And we think the only way to gain this satisfaction is to buy more, so corporations fulfill that wish. Which is why food packaging and advertising is designed specifically to fully encapsulate our attention. The thought of satisfaction is similar to not wanting to deal with obesity from the start. We wanted to stay satisfied with what we had, so we didn't have any incentive to change. So change was created for us. But now we can no longer stall this game, because we all must face the reality that life isn't a game of chess forever. Following the food industry preying on us through commercializing food, more importantly, the food we consume itself has the power to modify our brain to subconsciously feed into obesity. A TED video titled How the Food You Eat Affects Your Brain explores the effects food has on the human body. The video mentions that when we eat high glycemic foods or foods with a high sugar content, such as white bread or candy, these foods cause our brain to release an excessive amount of dopamine. As a result of us processing high amounts of sugar, this causes our focus and our concentration to go down. So why weren't we aware of this before? it's because we weren't taught this at all. If you're like me, in elementary school, you were taught the food pyramid and how important protein, dairies, and veggies were, but we're never taught that why they were considered important. This severe lack of education and misunderstanding is why we can't eat healthy, because we weren't taught why vegetables are good for us or why we shouldn't drink a gallon of Coke a day. We were taught what foods were unhealthy and healthy, but we never dove into the actual definition of these words. This lack of knowledge is why our country is in this mess in the first place. In fact, our diet has grown so out of control that Jerome Cavill, a chemist at the FDA, states, the US dietary guidelines are based off modern day habits. The fact is, for many foods, we're eating larger portions than we used to, and the changes to our nutrition labels reflect that. The changes in the food industry to increase consumerism has escalated to such a point where many of us cannot stay afloat, and is the reason our nutrition labels have drastically changed. So what do we do now? As my favorite DC superhero Barry Allen once put it, every decision has an alternative. CNN article, Small Meals versus Bigger Meals, proposes the alternative of eating small, frequent meals throughout the day to control our calorie intake and discourages large swings in blood sugar. Both solutions deal with portioning rather than cutting out specific foods. So really, portioning is the answer to obesity. If we focus more on portioning unhealthy foods, then we won't have a constant temptation to eat unhealthy foods like we do when we diet. Portioning may not eliminate obesity, but it's a longer-term solution, especially for the environment that we're up against. Obesity is that simple to figure out. Think about it. It took you 8 minutes to understand that obesity stems from the socioeconomics of foods, the marketing of foods, and the relationship between food and our brain. 8 minutes. If we can figure out how such a complex problem within 8 minutes, then we can replace a solution worth 40 years in an instant. Because if we value something, we will care. If we don't value something, we won't. 2 months later, my 11-year-old self was sitting in front of the board, ready to go at it again. My legs shook in anxiety, my cold palms clutched the metallic edge of the table. I was ready to face him again. I sat in front of the same brown oak chessboard, ordering the 16 pieces left to right like I always did, centering each piece on their starting point. My heart thumped with nervousness, but my brain remembered every checkmate, every check, every loss I have ever experienced that led up to this moment. My finger brushed the surface of the castle top piece, and like it was an illusion, my eyes didn't deceive me. My fantasy turned into a reality. I did it. I won. Checkmate.